You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Take one. Knock, knock.
Who dis? We're Stephen and Dana, and we can't believe you found our fucking podcast. We're so glad you're listening to it. We would never listen to it.
I don't even want to listen to it to edit it.
I don't even want to wake up in the morning. We're Stephen and Dana, and we're in the room. Welcome to a spooky bone chilling in the tomb with Stephen and Dana.
Thank you, Max, for that marvelous introduction.
Hey.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our Halloweeniest episode yet.
The Halloweeniest episode in the world.
And I think you put in our graphic, if you saw on Instagram or Facebook, in the tomb. Ooh. What are your favorite things about fall/Halloween? Do you like the goodies? I know you're not a dressing up Halloween person, and this year is different.
Halloween has never really been my bag or my pillowcase, as it were. But I do have a couple of Halloween traditions. Obviously, Hocus Pocus is a yearly tradition. I don't watch it during the year. I know some people do. I choose to save it so that every year it's been a while.
Yes, and Bette Midler's Halloween, which is her NYRP fundraiser galore.
Ticket purchased.
It is a virtual event this year, and the Sanderson sisters are back.
Yeah, and I'm not sharing my link. You have to go buy your own ticket.
$10. Come on, $10.
I have this Halloween pumpkin shirt that I've been wearing every year since I'm like 10.
You're the cutest.
It's like a Sisterhood of the Traveling Pant. It just somehow still fits-ish and fit then and fits now.
Tell us all what you've been up to, because you told me...
You gave me a Halloween tour of your neighborhood.
I did!
Your neighborhood goes all out.
I live in Astoria, Queens, and it's very neighborhoody. Everyone has like a brownstone or an actual house, so everyone
has like an actual like place to put this
right,
stuff
like a
outside.
cute little square yard by the road, and everyone can just go out, and people go all out in Astoria. Some people don't, obviously, but it's a really great place to be during the holidays, and the Christmas lights too. It's really cute. And we had
it was a really cute little walk. My legs were sore, girl. Ooh.
I'm so sorry. I got in 25,000 steps that day. That's a lot for anyone who's counting.
Measure a year.
And also, let's talk candy corn for 2 seconds before we bring on our guest.
Sure, because 'tis the seas.
It's a very controversial statement that candy corn is the best, but
You love candy corn.
Love it. There's something buttery about it, and the way it looks, I chomp off the white part first.
Yeah.
And then the middle, and then the bottom.
I don't not like candy corn. I can't consume it all day, but sure. Once a year, if there's a little dish.
And
I was today years old when I learned why it's called candy corn.
Yeah.
Wait, Jacob, our guest, you have not been introduced yet, but do you know this? Do you know why it's called candy corn?
I have an idea, but I want to hear what you have to say about it.
If you so the yellow's on the outside, the orange is in the middle, and the white is on the little nib. Mm-hmm. If you stack them all up, like in a little coil, it'll build like an ear of corn.
Oh.
Each individual piece is like a kernel, like a Jenga piece pulled out of the...
Yeah.
Yes, I was only today years old when I learned that too.
Mind blown.
Yep.
I also learned from Cartier Brown of the Food Network. She's an actual queen if you don't watch her. She's in her 3rd season of Delicious Miss Brown. I think it's Saturday mornings or the new one. But her Instagram is where it's at anyway. She taught us how to make homemade Butterfingers. And I thought, ooh, I love Butterfingers. How do you make them? This queen pulls out some candy corn and melts it over a double boiler, adds in some peanut butter, and sure enough, it tastes like Butterfinger. Mind is blown. Coated it in chocolate, let them set up. They're delicious 4 days later.
I mean, the takeaway from this episode already, we're learning so much. Stephen, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Cartier Brown.
Well, with that, we would like to introduce our very special guest for today.
Now that we're feeling a little spooked.
Setting the scene, we are going all the way to Canada for our first Canadian guest.
Good
We're
day.
international.
Soups Internash, and right to the north. Please welcome Jacob James.
Thank you.
You are here because you are a ghost enthusiast. However, you are also an actor, a drama professor, an artistic director. You've got it all going on. So we want to hear about all of it. And then, we'll get into the ghost stories. Just to let our listeners know what's happening.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you too for having me. It was I got a note from the wonderful Celicia Thomas, who I met through Beautiful on Broadway, and I had regaled her with a bunch of ghost stories that I think she told me I had to stop telling her because it was freaking her out. So she put me in touch with you guys. I'm thrilled to be able to nerdgasm some ghost stories with you guys here. But yes, I'm an actor. I've been an actor, since I was 11 years old, and grew up in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. My father's American, my mom's Canadian, so I'm a dual citizen. So I have between, I guess, 2010 and March, this past March, I was spending about half my time in New York City, and got to know, a lot about the theater scene in America and there. Unfortunately, I know it's a Broadway show. I don't actually have a Broadway, I have indirect Broadway connections, but
Same.
But yeah, I've done a tremendous amount of classical theater in Canada at the Stratford Shakespeare Festival. I spent my 20s basically doing Shakespeare, which was my two dreams as a kid, was to go to the National Theatre School of Canada, then become a part of the Stratford Festival, and they happened. I just figured I would grow old at Stratford, and but then the artistic directors changed, so I had to get some new goals.
That's so great.
Yeah.
As a kid, you already knew. I think
I gotta say, since we're on the subject of the witchy kind of stuff, I know it's not for everybody, and I've certainly had my bumps along the road with it. But I think about the law of attraction and the idea of manifesting things. And when I was a little kid, I just knew I would go on these trips, these high school trips to Stratford, and see these shows, and I'd go meet the actors at the stage door, and I'd watch them get on their bikes and ride home. Stratford's an idyllic little place, and with the river and everything, and I thought to myself, oh my God, that's their life. They just come to the theater and do a Shakespeare, and then get on their bike and have dinner, and then come back and do a different one, and it's like I want to do that. And so I used to go out used to be a lot more romantic when I was a kid, and I would go out into thunder and lightning storms and tell the storm that I was going to Stratford, and and I do this weird thing where if it was a full moon, I'd look at the moon, but imagine the moon's perspective looking at me, and it's and just try to use that connection to reinforce those. And everyone used to say, don't get your hopes up. NTS is really hard to get into. They take 13 students a year, and and Stratford is even harder to get into. And I was to quote Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, who was I think our greatest prime minister up until his son,
and one of Barbara Streisand's ex-boyfriends.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, but he had the classic quote. You might not know this one in America, but he just said, "Just watch me," and that was kind of my mentality with it, and it all happened. But it's that funny thing. It was the paradigms of life creep in. Do you know what I mean? And that voice
Yeah.
that says, you can't do that. You're not going to be able to do that. It's a reminder that I think I was actually practicing the law of attraction without even meaning to or knowing what it was. Do you know what I mean? So,
That's beautiful. And I
Wow.
mean, when people tell you that, they're telling you something more about themselves than they are about your own,
yep, you're absolutely right.
life.
Yeah.
So I love that. So tell us about you have the theater curation project.
Yes, thank you for bringing it up. It's kind of brand new. I was the interim education director for a company in Toronto called Eclipse Theatre Company, and it helped in the creation of an education branch of
Wow.
the theater. And anyway, and so in that work, I was trying to think about ways to direct some traffic to the website, to make just to let the world know that it exists. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And among my brainstorms, suddenly it's like it just came to me. I was like, my God, what? I thought to myself, what are we missing as actors? Like, what are some of the things that we're missing that we could somehow give to people as like a balm? And it's like, and one of the things that I miss a lot is the little conversations that we would all have, whether in rehearsal or backstage or at the bar after or whatever, where we would, how it goes, right? Like you'd start talking about someone who made an impact in your journey and the lesson that they taught you. Do you know what I mean? And then someone says, "Oh, I worked with that person too, and they taught me this," or and it got me thinking, why don't I just reach out to all my actor connection friends, which I have quite a large array of them. It's like, and I was like, and get them to do like a 2 to 5 minute little video, almost like a self tape, and talk about a mentor in their theater journey and a lesson that they taught them. Do you know what I mean? Just that, you know what I mean? And so to my gratefully, I discovered that people were very, very eager to supply me with videos and share these stories. And so I created a YouTube channel, which was of course nothing to do with Eclipse, but my own personal endeavor, which I made myself
Mm-hmm.
the artistic director of. And it's going to grow into something much bigger. I've got some cool plans for it. But right now it's a series of these videos, and we've got 6 episodes up. So yeah, it's on YouTube. It's called the Theater Curation Project. And it would, anyone who's listening, it would be wonderful. I'd be eternally grateful if you could go and subscribe and hit the notification bell and the like button and all that, because you can then access previous episodes and get alerted when new episodes come. But my hope with it is, the purpose basically is to curate these stories that would otherwise likely be lost. Do you know?
Yeah.
A lot of my mentors at Stratford, Richard Monette, William Hutt, Brian Bedford, they're gone, they're dead, and it's like I there's so many times I wish I could just say, "Oh, hey, can you tell me about this experience?" Do you know? And you can't, right? So my thinking is, when we're all dead, that this YouTube channel and its content might still be alive for future generations to not only get inspiration from, but like it's a bank of lessons.
Yeah.
You know what I
It
mean?
sounds like a
Major.
video quilt.
Yes. Yeah. So everybody listening, please go subscribe to the Theater Curation Project on YouTube.
And this is so right up our listeners' alley for sure, because this is what we do on our podcast. We
I
talk.
can't stop thinking about Penny Fuller and how I need to put
Yeah.
her in touch
You
with
got it,
you
man.
to like talk
Well,
Yeah.
Shakespeare and Alvina Krauss.
You guys send me videos. I'll have you be an episode.
Absolutely. I
The
love
other,
that.
the last thing I would just say on it is that aside from all those great reasons, the stewardship of the craft and the preservation of these stories and everything, I'm hoping that as an actor, when I sit back and kind of look at it from that perspective, as not the person putting this all together, the curator, it's like I go, that would be really nice to have like a weekly thing where you see friends and colleagues just appear and just hear them tell a story. Do you know what I mean about the theater? Like it's kind of a weekly balm, not balm,
Mhm.
balm for us too.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's
all.
what Dana was saying. That's what this podcast is for us. I mean, every time we leave somebody's apartment, we're like, did we just sit in Katie Finneran's house? And did that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, like I would say for me, and I think I would also speak for you, Stephen, our favorite guests or people to talk to are people like north of age 70, because like it is such a gift, these stories, because not many people remember anymore, and just the handing down of stories and generations.
Well, that's it.
In
My
their
old
words, in
Yeah.
their
yeah.
tone.
Well, Richard Monette, who was my kind of main mentor, he always used to say, it's an oral tradition, and if it's not passed down from generation to generation, bits of it are going to get lost.
I hope this is a good transition into some ghost stories, if you
Yeah.
would be so kind.
So I will say first off, I am a skeptical believer, meaning that I would debunk any logical explanation for any kind of anomalous type, stuff happening before I would go headlong into being it's a ghost or it's whatever. I'm very skeptical. That being said, I've encountered and had some experiences throughout my life where I really can't find an explanation for it. So I guess to start with, this is probably where I'm glad we covered the actor stuff first, because if we launched with this, they think I'm a crazy man, but they still might.
They still
But,
might. Actors are notoriously crazy.
So I grew up basically my parents divorced when I was 3, but remained, great co-parents and everything. But I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house in Kingston, which happened to be in this little suburb they called the wartime district that was made for people, veterans coming back from World War II. So it's that kind of era. From what I've been told, our house was the model home. So for the first little while, it was just this house and big farmer's field. However, there's the backyard and then a chain link fence and a giant graveyard in Kingston. And so this is basically where I grew up. Okay, and of course they filled it in, and it became a little suburb. But yeah, it's like my backyard let out. There's a chain link fence and then a big graveyard, right? So I do think that has something to do with it. I would always avoid this one room in the basement, the furnace room. Like I would just rush by it intuitively as a kid. Do you know what I mean? I felt like something was up, and that plays in much later in the story, in the journey. But so there was
I still
that.
have spots like that. There are still spots like in the house I grew up in. Like there are areas where I'm just, I remember being spooked taking out the trash at night.
Well, listen, like, don't let me digress too far, but like one of the things I teach in as part of one of my courses at Queen's is this great exercise that a real Jedi teacher taught me a long time ago, where it's about seeing and hearing without your eyes or your ears. That the idea that we're capable of so much more than the paradigm or the society we've been brought up in affords us or suggests that we are. And this exercise is basically what you do is you get a group of people walking in slow motion with their eyes closed backwards with no shoes on, slow motion, so no one's going to bonk heads or anything. But the idea is when you feel or even hear or get a flash of something that there's an obstacle behind you, you stop and turn and change directions. Do you know what I mean? And we got so crazy with it at theater school with the 13 of us in the class that by the end of it, we'd go for 15 minutes and no one would bump into each other. And then at the end, the teacher would be like, Jacob, where's Trish? And I'd point in the direction. Paul, where's Mac? pointed, and we'd open our eyes and we'd be pointing at the person.
Wow.
It's like, so that being said, like we're capable of so much more. So when we do get those kinesthetic or however the information comes to us, but those feelings of like, there's something up here. Do you know what I mean? I need to protect myself and listen at. Anyway, so cut to, years later, I was always fascinated by ghosts, really into horror movies as a kid and all that and everything. And the idea of what happens after we die, right? That's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
In 98, I got into a terrible car accident when I was 18. There was an ice storm in Canada. It's not a frequent occurrence, as one might think. But it hit really hard, and I was behind the driver. My friend's mom was driving, and my friend was in shotgun, and we spun out of control. Basically, what happened is, like, I remember saying, "Careful, you're not speeding." We spun out of control. We're out in the country, right? We spun out of control, and I remember everything inside the car being slow motion, and everything outside the window was like fast forward. And then I looked out my window and saw an electrical post like kind of come right at me. I closed my eyes, and it was black because I closed my eyes, but I distinctly remember everything going white from the like a negative image of an old silent movie fade at the end, like it went white from the outside in. It was completely white. Then I woke up in an ambulance, and then I was out. And then I woke up in a hospital, and the doctor's like, "Pee in this cup." And I did. And then I'm out. And then I woke up again, and my mom and dad were there, and they're taking bandages off my face, like the Joker in the Michael Keaton Batman. And it's like, anyway, so I found
which is the best Batman, by the way.
Oh, yes.
I just need to say that.
Yes, I agree. So yeah, in any case, years later, actually in New York, begrudgingly, I sat down with a psychic medium and didn't give her an inch. I was like, I'm not. And at one point she was like, you're like me. You just haven't developed the muscle. You're supposed to be doing the kind of work I'm doing. And I was like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, I was like, again, skeptic, right? And it's like, and she's like, no, it's not just because of your two imaginary friends when you were a kid, and I was like, huh? And she's like, but she goes, no, it was the car accident when you were 18 with all the ice and snow. And she's like, you died. You did. She's like, in terms of it, you actually, in our terms, she said, you crossed the veil, but you didn't go into the light because you have to come back and there's more you have to do. And I was like, okay, and so that just made me go, holy shit. And so, anyway, sorry, I'm jumping around. We'll go back to that. But so when I was like, after the car accident, I went to theater school, I went to Stratford, I was doing all that, and I was teaching with Stratford. We'd often come to Michigan, and we do this Michigan residency. And we didn't have Target in Canada at the time. And so Sarah Topham, who was my teaching partner, really wanted to go buy stuff at Target. And so we'd go and it's like, and I saw a digital voice recorder there. And I was like, oh, it's like those guys on those ghost hunting shows use. And I was like, hey, fuck it, I'm going to get one. And I'm in all these like ridiculously, allegedly haunted theaters, and namely the MSU campus in East Lansing, like the, what's it called? The something theater. Gosh, I can't, it's awful. Anyway, the theater there is like really deeply haunted, really, really haunted. And it just so happened that one of my contacts at MSU was all about ghosts. And so I kind of sweet talked her into letting me have the key. I hope no one from MSU is listening right now, but I he gave me the key, and I started doing Fairchild Auditorium. That's what it's called. And so I went in there and started doing stuff, and I was so green. Like, I didn't know how this works. The idea with EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, is that you've got a digital voice recorder. And just like dog whistles, we know there's frequencies that we can't hear with our naked ears, but are happening. Like a dog can hear that. We also know there's spectrum of light we can't see when you use a thermal imaging camera or a full spectrum camera or night vision camera. They can then, whether it's audio or visual, they can translate it into a form where then we can review it after the fact and hear or see it, So I was in the Fairchild Auditorium, and like just I did send you some MP3s, but I don't know if you're able to play them. But you don't need to rate this second. But I had the weirdest experience in there where I went in and I sat in the theater, and it's dead silent. No pun intended. It was dead silent. There's nobody there. And I'm just sitting there in the audience, and you ask a question and then you leave time for a response. Do you know what I mean? And when I reviewed it later, there was like a cacophony of sounds and voices happening that like I was just not hearing. In fact, one of them said, I didn't send you this one, but one of them says at the beginning, you hear this weird voice goes, turns to wolf. And then at the end, there's this weird voice, this quirky kind of sounding voice that like, as I was wrapping up, it goes, leave soon. And then it says something which I can barely make up, but it sounds like, I'm not trying to be narcissistic, but it sounds like it sounded like it said, leave soon, you with the talent. And so
you'll
like,
win a Tony.
I know. I was like, tell the casting director, right? But you know, like stuff like that. And then you know, so I did this teaching in Michigan for years, like 15 years I did this for. And so every year I'm like, okay, this is my chance to teach them Shakespeare, and then more importantly, do some ghost hunting in Michigan. You know, it's like so one of them that I sent you is probably a good one. I don't know what it's going to sound like, and you know, you might not hear it. There's Class A, Class B, and Class C. Class A EVPs, you don't need any kind of augmentation or anything to hear it. It's always best with headphones, but in Class B is like you can hear there's a voice, but you can't make out what it says. And Class C is kind of just a weird anomalous sound what I learned from doing this is that what you have to do is be extremely thorough about making a vocal note about any sounds that you do hear with your naked ear. Like that was the elevator door closing, that was a cab going by, or that was
right.
So that when you get a sound that's odd, but you haven't made a vocal note, you know you didn't hear it with your own. So if you want to look up the one, okay, so let me set it up, okay? So me and my a different teaching partner, Jane, were at this weird it was called the Old Town Schoolhouse or something, and they were busing kids in. So we're there by ourselves, and it was an old building, right? We're in the auditorium, and I'm just nerdgasming on recording. So any chance I get. So I said to Jane, I'm like, hey, while we're waiting, I'm going to go up for a smoke, but I'm leaving this recording. Okay. So just so you know, you're being recorded. And she's like, can I ask some questions? And I'm like, yeah, go for it. So she asked us, when I reviewed it months later, she asked a series of questions, and there's no response. However, in this, I was so new and green at this that like when she asked this question, I was like, oh, please don't let there be a fucking answer to that. I was, but just so you know, the question leading into what you're about to hear was, do you stay here all the time, or are you following Jacob around? And I'm just going to let you play it, and you tell me what you hear. You might not hear anything. You might. I'm just go for it. It's a child's voice going, I'm following Jacob.
Wait, how do you feel about that?
Well, that was the thing, is that at the beginning I was like, because she said it, right? She asked the question, and I was like, oh shit, I hadn't thought of that. You know, and then you hear this child going, I'm following Jacob. It's like, you know, off-putting, of course, that some ghost or see, I have to say this about EVP. Being a skeptical believer, I'll be the first person to say it doesn't prove it's the spirit of a dead person, right? It's just something we didn't hear. Now, the question with EVP is to go, is it intelligent? Like, can it see and hear me? You know, so
right.
So
it doesn't know. It's not an iPhone. It doesn't know your name is Jacob.
Exactly. You ask specific, what color hat am I wearing? And if you get a response that says blue, and you are wearing a blue hat, it would stand to reason that the thing source of this anomaly can see and hear you. But I still say, I can't say it's a dead person. I can't prove that. However, okay, so how did I feel? I felt a little terrified at first, and then was kind of an epiphany for me, where I went, well, you know what? Like, all this stuff is happening, like, I mean, anyway, I'm just not aware of it because I'm not hearing it. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, it hasn't hurt me yet. Do you know what I mean? And it's like,
Right.
the only difference here is that I recorded it and I actually heard it. Like, you could ask right now, is there a ghost following me around right now? And because we're not recording it, you never know. But if you record it, you might get a voice saying, yes, I am. I've been following you since I'm whatever. It's like, but I mean, in the end, it's kind of, yeah, it's a little spooky, but in the end, I find it's kind of inconsequential. Do you know what I mean? Like, if shit started going down, like, that's the thing I've learned in my penny of observation with this. Like, one thing, like, you can categorize hauntings, if you will, into intelligent hauntings, meaning it's the spirit of somebody who's come to communicate something to you, and it might be something that's someone who's like resident in a place or something like that, or comes to visit a place. Do you know what I mean? Then there's residual haunting, which is like it's like a tape being played on loop, so it's like at 3:00 a.m. every morning, the ghost of the lady in white walks from the dining room to the bedroom or something, and it doesn't see or hear you. This just happens, right? And then there's like the darker kind of things like poltergeists, or some might even go so far as like demonic kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Where you're dabbling with like Ouija boards and things like that. Like, I never use a Ouija board. I've watched too many videos of bad shit going down. Like, there's this awful, I won't even say the name of the, anyway. But yeah, if I ever see like cupboards opening and shutting or things like that, then I'm like, fuck this. And I get the sage, and I used to date a really beautiful First Nations woman, and she taught me all about native medicine, which, whether you believe it or not, it's supposed to be able to kind of cleanse and clear.
I have a quick question going back to when you heard what the spirit say, you with the talent.
Yeah.
I take that as you with the intuitive talent. And is that...
Yeah, that's what
just a stamp of approval? Like, oh, maybe I am this.
Well, it goes back to what the psychic was saying to you, the medium, who's like, you're like me, you have the thing in you, you just haven't tapped into it.
In terms of you with the talent, so I'll say this is not an opener, but I'm going to tell you guys because we're on the subject, and I think this is on par with what we're doing. So I have a 6-year-old son, okay? And that was another thing that the psychic had told me, and this was like almost a decade before my son was born, was even a twinkle in an eye. She's like, another reason you need to keep developing these skills is that your son's going to need your help with it. And at that point, I was like, okay, and so when his mom was pregnant for him, and like before the kind of the 6-month point, I happened, as the universe does, you walk into a bookstore and you suddenly face to face with a book that seems relevant, and it was basically like the artist's way for mediums. And to draw the distinction, like a psychic is somebody who's going to like meet you and kind of be able to look at your future and your past, and it's going to be more individually about you and getting information off of you. Whereas a medium is the person who speaks with dead people, for lack of a better term. It's the person who communicates with the dead and passes on messages, right? And so I saw this book. So it's like, okay, well, I guess that's a sign from the universe. I'm going to start this practice. And it's like a weekly practice where you do these exercises and you just develop these skills. And I really struggled being a skeptical believer, because it's like, you're supposed to do these exercises, then you do a spirit meditation, which is supposed to be the communication. And, whether everyone gets the information in different ways. Some people are clairintuitive, clairvoyant. Whether it's all the different senses, right? For me, it seemed to turn out to be more of an intuitive kind of thing, where I would get an idea put in my head or an image put in my head, rather than literally seeing something or hearing something. So, but I was struggling with it, because you do these spirit connection meditations, and then you would go write in your journal, do you know what I mean, what it was. And I just kept saying to myself, I'm just filling in the blanks with my imagination. Like, how do I know I'm actually like, how do I know this is coming from outside me or it's just coming from inside me? And so I said in one of these spirit meditations, I was like, I need some validation or I'm going to stop doing this because I feel like I'm wasting my time. Like I don't, I need to know that this is working somehow. Do you know what I mean? If I'm going to keep going with it. So this was in Stratford here, and it's a very old little town. Like the houses are like 1860 houses, and like it's, ripe for all of this stuff. And so I was in the house by myself, and the exercise was you learned how to, and this is back to that exercise I do with the students. It's like you're stretching out with your aura, and the idea is when you feel a kind of static friction, means you're coming in contact with something else, and you initiate a communication. So I got to the top of the stairs, turned the corner, and like fully felt it, like something at the other end of the hall. And the image I got was this matronly kind of woman, kindly, an apron, sort of dressed in the 50s style. Do you know what I mean? And the thought that kept coming into my head was Betty, Betty, Betty. My name is Betty. And then the next bit of information was I lived in this house. I died in this house. I raised my two sons in this house. That was coming. I was like, okay, so what's the message? Like, what do you need? And it was tell Shalina, who is Henry's mom, whose house it was. It was like tell Shalina that she knows there's something in the place, but I want her to know it's benevolent. I don't mean any harm. And that was it. So I wrote it all down in my journal, and I was like, I just imagined a whole thing, and I'll tell Shalina about it. And then I was like, a couple months later, my friend Phelon was coming by cab, and it was raining, and all the there's like maybe 6-7 cabs in this town. It's that small, it's like, and they're all old dudes who grew up here, and it's like, and Thelon's getting out of the cab. I'm going to go pay for the cab. And he's chuckling. And it's like, what's so funny? And he's like, oh, the old cabbie was just talking about the people that used to live in the house. And I was like, oh. And so I went up to the cabbie. I was like, what can you tell me about the people that used to live here? And he's like, oh, well, there was John and Betty. And I was like, okay. And I was like, are they still with us? And he's like, well, John's in a home, but Betty died quite a while ago. Because I hope it does make you uncomfortable, but she died in the house. I remember when the ambulances came up. And I was like, okay, thanks. And I'm walking away, and he yells as I'm walking away. He's like, oh, they raised their two sons there. And I was like, well, fuck. I was like, that's not a coincidence. That can't be a coincidence, right? Like, I was so that happened. But then the thing was is that my son Henry was fast approaching, right? So it's like, I don't want to be playing with doors opening doors I don't know how to close with a baby coming around. So I really took it and totally put it to the side, along with the ghost hunting too, because I was like, I want this to be a nice, clean, safe environment for my kids. But yeah, so it's like, I think that's maybe what you with the talent was referencing.
What have you found out yet how your child will need this?
Great question.
It is a great question.
Has it revealed itself?
I've been extremely careful not to suggest any or try to lead him towards the idea of it.
Leave your books lying around.
Yeah, no, it's like, yeah, exactly. And I would never be like, who were you before you were Henry, or anything like that, I would wait for him to volunteer that kind of information. But there have been, I can't go into much detail about this particular event because it's tremendously personal thing, but it was in New York. He was probably 2.5, maybe 3. I think he was like 2 3/4, and he was still in a stroller. And basically, it's like we were going along. We were down by, we lived in the Upper West Side, so we were down by Lincoln Square, and by the movie theater, there's you go into an entrance of a building, and there's this sort of wall fountain. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of hidden away. You know the one I mean? And so we're going along, and he saw the fountain. He was like, oh, hey, let's look at the fountain. And I was like, okay. So we went there, got him out of his stroller. We hung out, and and then all of a sudden he's like, okay, we have to go. And I was like, oh, why do we have to go? And he's like, right now, let's go. And he's getting in the stroller himself, which he never did. And I was like, okay. And so I get him buckled in. We come out of that little walkway, and I turn to the left. He's like, no, go that way. And I'm like, yeah, but no, home is home's that way. And he's like, no, go that way. I'm like, okay. So I turn that way and I cross, I think it's 65th where the yoga place was. It's like, anyway, so it's like I crossed 65th right to where the building where not the news place, but just before. Do you know where there's that little mall in the middle where the subway is, right across from the Lincoln Center? And I crossed that street, and of all the hundreds of thousands of people that are walking around at that point, boom, I come face to face with this particular person who then related particular information that 100% changed the direction of my life. And had Henry not orchestrated that, stage managed that, I never would have bumped into the guy, and I never would have known the thing. And so that's as much as I can really say about it. So there's been little things like that where I've kept there was another one where we were driving, we do drives from New York to Kingston. And so you're going up I-81 through Syracuse, to the Thousand Islands is where the border crossing is. And it was just the two of us, and it was winter. And we passed Syracuse, or sort of in between Syracuse and Watertown. And there's this little stretch on this park called Pulaski. And Pulaski is its own weather system. It's like a snow tunnel or something like that. And we're going along, and there was snow, but it wasn't snowing. It was fine. We're past Syracuse, and he's like, hey, we should get some gas. No, it's like, we're okay, buddy. We'll be able to get to Watertown before we need gas. And he's like, no, you should get gas. And I was like, well, okay, if you like, I really don't think we need gas, man. He's like, there, pull over there. I see a gas station. I'm like, okay. So I pull over, top up the gas, get back on the road. Then we're about 10 minutes driving, and we get to Pulaski, and boom, it's a whiteout. Complete whiteout, like bad whiteout. And I managed to find like some taillights of a truck ahead of me, and just like at, less than 10 miles an hour, we're moving along. So this stretch should have taken us about 15 minutes to drive through. It ended up taking about an hour and a half to get through because of and we would have run out of gas in the middle of a whiteout if Henry had not prompted me to get it. So yeah. So I've had some indications, but anyway, listen. I see that we're coming up on. I'm babbling, but I want to share a couple more quick ones with you, if that's okay. Just before I get too far off. So there, I was doing this play that I've done. It was the play. I was going to do my third production of it, but it was canceled because of the pandemic. We were due to start rehearsals March 26th. And Canada, I think when Trudeau, I think it was right around then when Trudeau did the it's time to come home, announcement. And anyway, Billy Bishop Goes to War is this amazing Canadian play. It's a one-person show with a piano player where the actor, it's 2 acts, 6 songs, 100 pages, and where the actor plays, I think, 21 characters by himself.
Wow.
It's so fun. Oh my god,
totally fun. I'd done 2 other productions of it, and I was like, I learned all the fucking lines again. Anyway, but anyway, when I was doing my first production of it, it was at this theater called the Thousand Islands Playhouse, right close to the border by Alexandria Bay. But on the Canada side. And they have a big theater called the Springer Theater, but they have a smaller kind of black box, which is the old fire hall of the town, right? And it's converted into a small black box theater with the admin offices and some extra space in the back that they were yet to refurbish. But still an old police station fire hall of the time. So there were like actual jail cells in the back and stuff like that. So I had a stage manager, a dear friend named Monica, on that, and she's into it. And so we decided it's totally against the rules, but we were going to like sleep over at the theater and ghost hunt all night and like go through it and do it. And so we finished our 2-show Sunday or whatever it was, and acted like we weren't about to just sleep there, so we waited for everyone to leave. And then we got back in because she had the key, of course, right? You got to find the people with the keys. So we went back in, and we had a couple different things. She had her own digital recorder. I had my own. We also had this thing called, it's a questionable device called Ghost Box, where the idea is that you can hack a transistor radio so that when you're skipping the radio stations, it never stops. It just goes in an ultra fast loop. So the most you're ever going to hear is a little bit of like, yep, little bits like that. So if you suddenly are hearing a full sentence, the theory is it's a ghost talking to you through the thing. So we use that anyway. So there are a couple things just I want to make note of with that experience, of course, because it was a theater, right? We were there overnight. Yeah, you're hearing noises, and you don't know where they come from. Everything. We kept getting basement, all on the radio thing and also on our EVP recordings, but we couldn't access the basement. But we kept being like, what's going on in the basement of this place? Anyway,
so why couldn't you access it?
Yeah, well, there's but there was a really curious thing that happened that I think kind of advanced my fascination with EVP. Is we were at the jail cells, right? And Monica was kind of at the doorway in the hall, and I was right at a cell, right? And I put my hand through the cell bars with the EVP recorder. Monica's recording with hers, but at a distance away, right? Still in the vicinity. And I said, why are you in the cell? What did you do to get in the cell? So that's what I heard when I got in. And it seems to me to be pretty clearly a gruff voice going, bullet. And then you kind of hear a different voice go, afterward. The curious thing, though, was that like when I was reviewing, and we time coded it, Monica and I, so we were in sync with our recorders, I was like, okay, I got this weird thing when I was at the cell. Can you just send me your full file? And she sent it to me. I got to the same point because I wanted to hear if hers picked it up too. I was curious. I was like, okay, so this is interesting. So I got to it, and it's there. It's there. However, it's much fainter than it was on mine. So it seems to me that it stands to reason by following this logic that when I put that the source of this voice was inside the cell, because I was in such close proximity that it would have been speaking right into the microphone, whereas Monica was a distance away and she still got it, but it came off further away, right? So that was curious. I got a weird picture in that night. I haven't got much visual evidence, just simply because I haven't gone and bought really cool cameras and stuff. But I just with an old digital camera, this is probably 10 years ago, I snapped a bunch of shots of the empty space in the theater, and then there was one where there was this little kind of like purpley blur, and I zoomed in on it, and I don't think it's pixelation, or there's a term for it. I think it starts with a D, where your mind will see an image out of pixels, but there, it was all pixelated all around this. But when you zoomed in on this purple thing, you could see like the beginning of a tie and the knot and a collar and a lapel and up into a neck and a chin with a mouth and a nose and one eye. Like,
oh my God,
it is, man. And I was like, but the curious thing is that like you had to zoom in so far that like it would have been miniature in the room, or else it was in some other dimension. I don't know. We had a weird thing. Monica is also a bit sensitive in terms of the ghosty stuff too, and she's a stage manager. She's level-headed. She's no bullshit. It's
yeah.
and we had this moment where we're upstairs, and it's the Thousand Islands Playhouse, so it's right on the St. Lawrence River, right? And we're looking out the window, and her voice got weird. It didn't sound quite like her voice, and this is where I start to go, okay, fuck this shit, because this is not. It's like, but she's like, it's beautiful. Look at it. It's so beautiful. And I was like, what? And she's like, the hurricane. I was like, the hurricane. And she's like, look across the river. See the hurricane? I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, it's no hurricane. And she's like, it's so gorgeous. It's so right. I was like, what? And I was like, let's go outside and have a smoke break. I was like, so we went outside, and she came outside, and she's like, oh, that's weird. She's like, I felt like I was like sleepwalking or asleep or something. And I was like, do you remember what you said up there? And she's like, no. And I'm like, you're talking about a hurricane across the river and how beautiful and how right it was. And she's like, what? Like, she didn't know she said it. And it's like, the thing is, like, I'm here to tell you, like, she's not that kind of person that would.
Yeah.
And so the weird thing is that about 2 weeks later, there was a hurricane in upstate New York, it was not a hurricane, but like a bad windstorm that was, and we actually came to the theater that day that it was happening, terribly rained, but you could just look across the river and it looked like chaos. Now I remember saying to them, I was like, was that what you were seeing? And she's like, I don't remember, so that was odd. I feel like I could go on. I'm just trying to think really quickly. The basement.
Unbelievable.
To cap it off. Okay. So remember I talked about the furnace room in the house I grew up in, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think I sent you this one. Oh, I should just reference quickly the other one you have. The MP3 it says Away, and we're in this. Shalina and her cousin Christine and I were in the Fort Garry Hotel in Winnipeg, which is allegedly one of the most haunted hotels in Canada. And I was going around at 2 p.m. and we're like fucking whispering because people are asleep, and we're on the second floor where it all went down, and we're being surreal. And again, you make a vocal note if you hear anything, right? So when I'll say, okay, can you play this MP3 now? The crazy thing is what you hear. At least I say what I hear is a man's voice go away like that, like almost like to startle you. Away, and it's like, and we don't even react. We just keep talking, keep doing our thing. Like we don't react to it, but it's on the MP3. Anyway, so that's that. So that I got all the MP3s.
Unbelievable.
So the last thing is the furnace room at my grandparents' place. So many years later, I was down there and going through like old boxes of stuff, my stuff, and I just left it recording. And I listened back to it. There was nobody in the house, no TVs were on. I'm very thorough about making vocal notes. So there's nothing. And then all of a sudden you hear this old man's voice go, yeah, now pick that up. And then it keeps, and then the same voice later goes, yeah, now take that out. And then you hear a different voice go, he's excited now, like that. Last one, I'll tell you one more. Okay, this was because it's New York. I'll tell you one last. This will leave you on a spooky note for all your listeners, okay, and for you. There was one time when I was very, very new at it. I was living with my ex Carly in Harlem. And she was out of town. Our roommate was out of town. It was the first time I had the place to myself, and I was still very new at the EVPs. And I was like, oh, cool, I'll do this apartment. And this is where I learned the big lesson. If there's one thing I can pass on to anyone who wants to attempt EVP, don't do it in the place where you live, because you never know what you might get. And I had pretty, like novel and kind of interesting ones, throughout my journey with this. But this one was the one that like nearly put me off it forever. Okay. But I managed to come back. Okay. There by myself. It's nighttime. It's Harlem, by myself. And, I'm just asking questions, blah, 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 blah. Nothing. And I listened. So I listened back, got the headphones in. And I caught something I'm still yet to have caught again, which is a dialogue between two different voices. It's an odd dialogue, but one voice seemed benevolent. And like in my mind, in my gut, in my intuition, frankly, I feel like one was a spirit guide, if you will, or some kind of member of my spirit team that is there to help me and protect me. And the other was the opposite. It was not. And it was
who would play the spirit guide and who would play the not spirit guide?
If it was okay, it was a Cockney accent, so I'd say something like Michael Caine as the nice one, and then Andy Serkis as the bad one. And so it's like it didn't sound like Gollum, but it was close. It's like, so this was what I heard. I'm sorry I don't have the MP3 for you, but this is what I heard. You hear the nice guy go. He goes enough. And then you hear the other voice go, you picked my day. You don't like it? Get out. And then you hear, then get away. And then you hear this weird, like, bubbly, airy sound, like, and then there's this long pause, and then you hear, okay, hi. And that's it. That's it. And I took those fucking headphones off, and I was like, I am done. Never again. That's right.
So do ghosts pick a day?
Oh, why?
Get off my train!
Anyway, there you go.
Oh my God.
If you ever want to do I'll meet you next Halloween. I'll give you a part 2 because there's so much more.
Oh my God. Yeah, no,
we're holding you to it because we have no plans.
We'll be here next year as well.
I have to go watch like a Bake Off or something. I'm spooked. Good.
Well, I think that's what we were trying to accomplish. I thought that would be a good note to leave it on.
I love that.
Hi-ho, hi-ho.
There are 7 very well-known dwarves in history. If you were the 8th dwarf, what would your name be?
It would be Clever.
Clever dwarf? I don't think we've had a clever dwarf, but that's a clever dwarf right there.
You fit right into our merry band of misfits, for sure.
Cheers.
Our merry band of 8th dwarves.
This was a lot of fun, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Chilled. I'm so glad I put on like the pumpkin and got in the zone because I am spooked. I'm glad we did this during the day too. Can you imagine?
Yeah, that's true.
I had so many full body chills, and as someone who is like totally kind of leaning into reincarnation stories, I love it. I'm so interested.
Let's talk after this. I've got lots to tell you about with that too. So, yeah. Oh, that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other thing.
Okay, you guys. We're
gonna start a monthly series.
Thank you so much, Jacob James. Where can people find you?
You can find me. I'm Jacob O'Neill James on Instagram and just Jacob James on Facebook. But the most important thing you could do for me this Halloween season is go subscribe to the Theater Curation Project. And also, like I'm as I said, I'm a university professor, and I'm using it as we adapt to remote online learning. Using it as a teaching tool, and a lot of other professors in Canada are starting to pick up and use it too. So please, if you're an educator or a student, share it far and wide, and learn the lessons that all these great people are. There's a new episode each week.
I love that.
Amazing. We're so here for that. It's such a big part of what we do and why we want to talk to people like you.
It was so fun and such a great break from what we normally do. Like I love it. I love it so much. And I'm going to call you. Thank you. And with that,
until next time, friends. Bye.
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 Boom. In the Room with Stephen and Dana is produced by Stephen Farazi
and Dana Craig. Special thanks to Joel Wagoner for tinkling the ivories on our theme song. Hit him up at joelwagoner.com.
We apologize, and you're welcome. We'd also like to thank Jesse Wiener, Wiener, for our jazzy original music sprinkled throughout each episode.
You can find him at jessewiener.com.
Last but certainly not least, we'd like to thank Kevin Thomas Garcia for taking all of our ridiculous photos. You can find him online at ktgnyc.com. We are all over the internet on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at In The Room Pod.
Follow us, like us, share us, pimp us out. And don't forget to subscribe to In The Room Podcast. We everywhere, so subscribe. And thank you so much for listening.
You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.